Hello and hello and welcome back to my channel. Um, in our last video, we talked about list operations, and in this video, we'll be looking at list comprehension, which is another way of creating lists. So, when we to define our list or to create a list, we could use square brackets, which accepts as many inputs as we want. For example, we have line 1 accepting inputs from numbers 1 to 10. That's about 10 inputs. But alternatively, we can use the keyword list to create a list. And when we do this, when we use the keyword list to create a list, it only accepts one input. And in this case, it's range 11, which would print numbers from 0 to 10. And if we wanted to print numbers from 1 to 10, would, yes, would add 1 to the inputs in range, and 1 will be the starting number. So basically, let me digress a bit. Let me talk about range. So range prints out numbers from 0 till the last number before the input. For example, if we have range 5, it's going to print out 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. If we have range 100, it's going to print out from 0 to 99. But if we don't want it to start from 0, we can initialize a start point. In this case, we added 1 to range to say start from 1, right? If we wanted to start from 5, we'd simply replace 1 with 5. So basically, getting back to our topic, we create a list by either using a square bracket or the list keyword. And when we use the list keyword, it only receives one input. Let me drive my point home further. Let me imagine that I have, just for you to see what I mean. So when we run this, I expect to get an error. Yes, this is it. It says list expected at most one argument equal 4. So if I wanted to make this list, let's say 1, 3, 5, 6, maybe I could have just created a variable. Let's call that variable GT, something random. Let's say this is GT, and I have this. So to make a list out of it, I'll use GT instead. There you go. So that's how you can make a list of 1, 1, 3, 5, 6 using the keyword list. You would have to define an algorithm, not an algorithm. You would have to define a variable with those numbers or those inputs, and then pass that variable into list as an input or as an argument. So having said that, let's move into list comprehension now. So let's take our first example with list comprehension. So what list comprehension basically does for us is that it reduces the number of lines of code when we are creating a list. I'm going to give an example. Let's say that we have this. Let's say that we have this. So from numbers 0 to 9, I want to return even numbers only, and not just returning even numbers. I want to return the squares of even numbers to line 10, to this empty list. So first of all, we defined an empty list, and for numbers 0 to 9, we want to find out this modulo x modulo 2 is equals 0. So x modulo 2 is equal to 0 means for every number in 0 between 0 to 9, if when we divide that number by 2, our remainder is 0, we want to square that number, and whatever answers we get, we want to return it, add it to the list in line 10. So that would mean, for example, 2 divided by 2 is 0. So of course 2 is even, and we want to square 2, that's in line 13. 2 raised to the power 2, that will give us 4. So our number is going to be 4 will be added to that list. Then we move further, 3. 3 divided by 2 would give us 1. So it doesn't fulfill this condition in line 12. We move on. We move to the next number, 4. 4 divided by 2 has a remainder of 0, right? So it fulfills this condition. We square 4, which is 4 times 4, which is 16. We add 16 to the list in line 10. Let's run that to see. So this 4 lines of code can be written as list expression in just 1 line of code. Let me grab that. It can be written as list expression in just, let's see. Okay, there's no print statement. Let me add a print statement. We have, so we want to print, okay. So we want to print this, and when we print, so one thing to take note of when you write the print statement is the indentation, especially when you write a function, which we'll discuss much later, or a for loop. So the whatever you return, if you return your print statement or your return statement in your loop, you're going to be getting a different result from when you return it outside the loop. So that's just something to note for future. So when we print at line 14, we are going to get this. This is the square even list. Okay. So let's move on. So we want to write a list comprehension for lines 11 to 15. And like I said, when we write the list comprehension, it's just going to take 1 code line. Let's look at it. So to express those 4 lines of code as list operation, we are going to start with, you always start with your square bracket. So you put your square bracket, you write your, first of all, you write your expression, and then you iterate. So the expression, what we are returning to square even, to the least square even, what we want to return is x squared. So that's the expression. So like I said, when you want to write, you start with your square bracket, you input your expression, then you write your for item in iterable. Let me put that down in a comment. So for list comprehension, this is the basic structure. This is the basic structure for your list comprehension. You have the square bracket. Then after you have your square bracket, you have your expression. And after the expression, you're going to have the for loop, looping through the items in the iterable. So the first thing you have is your expression, then space, you have your for loop. So you have for item and whatever, let's call it the iterable, for item in iterable, not in iterable. For item in iterable. So this is the basic structure of your list comprehension. And we have written these 4 lines of code from line 11 to line 15, actually 5 lines of code, just with 1 line of code line 19. So like I said, when you write a list expression, the first thing you do is when you define the name of the variable, you write down the name of the variable, your equal sign, then the square bracket. Then the first thing you write is the expression. By expression, I mean what is the formula for whatever we are trying to have as the finished result in the list. Then, after writing an expression for that, the next thing we write is, in this case, which is, like I said, the basic structure, you write the for loop. So, let's print and see what we have. So we print. Right. So look at it down here, the last result we have on the console. So when we print, we have exactly the same result as we had from the 5 lines of code. So like I said before, your list comprehension basically just helps you, it helps you reduce the lines of code when you are writing into a list. So the basic structure, square bracket, your expression first, then your for loop that's saying for this item in each row. And I've explained range before. Your range just gives you numbers from 0 to, in this case, 9, because we have range 10. So for x in this range, that means for every number, for 0, for 1, for 2, for 3, if each of those numbers divided by, when you divide by 2 has modulo 0, then this expression happens. So that's basically how your list comprehension goes. So we are going to look at other structures. Let's not call them basic. This is pretty basic, but we're going to be looking at other structures for your list comprehension. So let's take a look at this one. So for this one, we want to, this is another structure. So as I said, the first thing, write down your expression. For this is for your list comprehension. Still for list comprehension, for list comprehension, when it's not so basic, the first thing you do, like I said, square bracket, then expression, and in this case we have 2 for loops. So when you want to iterate through lists, for iterating through 2 lists, you have expression first, then for item 1 in each rebel 1, we'll just cut it short here, then you write for item 2 in each rebel 2. We are going to take an example to see how that works in each rebel 2. So this, I think I should specify, this is 1 for loop. The last example was for 1 for loop. This is for examples where you have to move through 2 for loops. 2 for loops. So let's take this example. So we have our first list, let's call it numbers 1. We have our second list, let's call it numbers 2. And we want to find a product pair. Let's call it a product pair. We want to find a product pair. So to find this product pair, what we basically want to do is we want to multiply first number by second number. For each number from numbers 1 list, for each number in numbers 2 list. So basically what this thing does is it picks for number 1, let's call this x for clarity, or I, let's say for I, for j, okay, I and j. Okay, so let's So let's also change this to I and J. Let's also change this to I and J. Okay, so for I in numbers 1, it's going to pick up the first one, 1. Then for J in numbers 2, it's going to pick 4. So we're going to have 1 times 4, 4. 1 times 5, 5. 1 times 6, 6. That's the first list. Then it goes back to numbers 1, picks the second one, 2. And it goes back here, picks it one by one. 2 times 4, 8, 10, 12. That way. Then it goes back here. So this is like creating a multiplication table. So this is all it takes. Make a list of 2 numbers and iterate through the 2 lists. You pick one from the first list, then iterate through the second list, multiplying both numbers. You pick the other one, the next one from the first list, come down to the second list, iterate through every number in the second list, multiplying each pair. Now let's run that to see what we get. So yeah, this is what we get. We have, just like I said, 1 times 4, 1 times 5, 1 times 6. Then we have 2 times 4, 2 times 5, 2 times 6. Then we have 3 times 4. So now we have a product pair. Every number in this one has multiplied every number in list 2. Okay, let's comment these before we move over to next things. All right, the next structure for list comprehension we'll be looking at would be, let's say we have a nested list comprehension. For nested lists, so the basic structure for this, just like I said, the first thing square bracket, the next thing your expression. Then, because it is a nested list, we want to write a for loop this way for item and iterable. I'm tempted to stop at iter. So this is a nested list, means a list in a list. If you can remember in the last video, I think there was an example where we appended pink, and then we printed out hot and warm, something like that, and we had a list of lists. So a list of lists basically means that in a list you have 2 lists inside a list. So when we want to create something like that using list comprehension, so what we're going to do is, first we are going to have the parent, let's call it the parent list, the list, and then that's the first square bracket which I've written. So my expression and the first for loop would be in the first, there will be a sub list in the list. So you have expression for item, the expression for item in iterable would be the first sub list in the general list. Then the rest of the statements will have the rest of the other for loops. So for this one, we'll have, let's call it outer item. For outer item and outer iterable, let's just end up outer iter, right? So this is the basic structure for writing a nested list comprehension. Like I said, first of all, you have your square bracket, but because this is a nested list is a list in a list. So for the first list in this basic structure, we are going to have expression for whatever it is we want to return, then our first for statement. Then outside the list, we are going to have the other for statement. This is especially useful when we want to create matrices. Maybe I should add it somewhere here. This is especially useful for creating, where's my cursor? For creating matrices. Okay, let's put down that example. Okay. Useful for matrices. Where am I writing? Okay. Useful for matrices. All right. So let's say we have a rows, a list, columns, another list. It's more like a multiplication table. So we have our row terms. We want to always return row terms column. Now the first for loop is for column in columns. So that means for every number in the list, this list column, every number in this list column, we want to pick one first, and then for row in rows, we want to pick each number from the rows list. Let's just run this and see how. Let's just run this and see. Yes. Let's just run this and see how it works out. So basically what this does is it's going to go, like I said, it's going to pick each element from both the rows and the columns list. So what it does is, for example, it picks from the rows. For row in rows, it's going to pick 1. That's the first number in the list. And then row times column. So it picks the first one from the rows according to the expression. And then it picks the first number from the column, which is 1. So it goes 1 times everything in the column. That's the first list. Then it goes again 2 times everything in the columns. That's the second list. And it goes that way until it's done. You might want to ask, what if we had column times row? Would we have the same thing? Let's simply check. If we had column times row, would we have the same result? There you go. We still have the same result when we have column times row. So yeah, the first number, the iterable in the main square bracket. What I call the main square bracket is this first square bracket that I've just highlighted. The iterable in the main square bracket, which is this one, is where we start picking numbers from. Then the iterable in the sub, the one I have just highlighted, follows. Okay, let's look at another structure for our list comprehension. So we can also write a list operation using if-else, and using an if-else statement. Yeah, in list comprehension. So what would the basic structure look like? Of course, start with a square bracket. Then the next thing, your expression. If you've not learned anything in this video, I think it's pretty much easy to remember. Square bracket, then expression, then what next? Once you write your expression, the next thing you want to do is to write your if statement before the for loop. So you have your expression, and like I said, you have your if condition. If something happens, then else. Of course, it comes together with the condition. Then we have, if something happens, we do this expression, right? Else, let's define an expression 2 for it. Then for some iterable from item in, I would usually stop here in iter. That's right. Let's pick an example. So from the example, let's look at this one. This is a pretty simple example. Let's look at it. Let's say we have a list of numbers from 1 to 10, and we want to check if we want to return a list of even numbers. So we want to know which numbers are even. We actually want to print even. So what we do is we want to return a list of even, for example, even, odd, even, odd, even, odd. That's what we want to do. So first of all, expression, what we want to return is even, right? Or odd. And there is a condition for that. So, like I said, once you put down your square bracket, the first thing is your expression. In this case, it's even, but then there is a condition. So that's why the first thing you do is put down even. Then what is the condition? The condition is that if a number, the modulo of a number divided by 2 is 0, then it is even, else it is odd. That's the condition. Then we also need an iterable to go through every number in the list. So that's why we have the for loop here. I hope that makes sense. So when we print this, let's print out to see what we have. There you go. So we have odd, 1 is odd, of course, 2 is even, 3 is odd, just like that. So we have these numbers in the list, given the condition. So just to recap everything we've said so far in this video, I feel like we should stop here. There's still so much to discuss about lists. Maybe we'll do one more video to talk some more about lists, or maybe not. We have looked at how to write list comprehension, and we looked at different structures for different list comprehensions. So for the basic structure, the first thing you remember, everything you want to write in your list comprehension has to be in a square bracket. And the first thing is your expression. Then you think about whether you want to put down, whether you want to derive your final answer using a for loop or an if statement. And if it is a for loop, is it just basic? Do we just use one for loop for, just as we have in line 20, we just have one for loop, right? And the condition. Or are we looking for a nested list? That's a list in a list. And if it is a nested list, we have our expression and the first for loop in the sub list, in the sub square bracket. And we have the other for loop in the main square bracket. Or if we just want to, by some operation, combine numbers from, or items from 2 lists, we could just write 2 for lists. And when we do that, or when we are doing that, we just want to use 1 square bracket, just like we see in line 27, and 2 for loops. We can also use an if-else statement in the list comprehension, and we only need one square, just one pair of square brackets, our expression, the if-else statement, and then a condition. So we'll be ending here. If you did like this video, subscribe, comment, share with your friends, and I'll see you in the next one.